the atrocities committed by Hamas against Israel. There are some in this country, and you see it more in our college and university campuses, who don't seem to see this issue with moral clarity, but it really is an example of unspeakable evil committed against innocent civilians, innocent children. And I can say that the Republican conference stands in solidarity with Israel and its right not only to exist, but also to defend itself and to protect its citizens from these types of attacks. Right now, the administration's focus should be on getting Americans home, working on trying to free up some of the hostages that are still held in Gaza, and I hope that will be first and foremost what they work on. Let me just say, too, that as you think about this issue and the issue of national security, the director of the FBI warned just recently that there could be copycat attacks here in the United States. And that really bears on one of the issues that the leader mentioned with respect to whatever package emerges from the Congress and is put forward by the White House, that we deal with the issue of our southern border. And if you look at just in the last 2 years, they have a category called special interest aliens. And in that category, there have been 659 Iranians that they have apprehended trying to come across our southern border. And in this last year, there have been 151 people on the terrorist watch list who have been apprehended at our southern border, which is more than the last 6 years combined. This is a national security issue, and it demands attention from this administration. And so I hope that as we contemplate dealing with a package up here that addresses the needs in Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan and other places around the world, but that focuses clearly on the national security challenges that we have here right at home in the United States. And that is a porous southern border that this administration has ignored since the time it took office.
Well, national security starts with border security, and under Joe Biden, our country is a lot less safe because our southern border is wide open. If you talk to Border Patrol, they will tell you that bad people are coming in record numbers from around the world. Terrorists, criminals exploiting the significant increase in the flow of illegal immigrants to the country. Hundreds on the FBI terrorist watch list have already been apprehended, but they can't tell us how many got through, how many are here already, because under Joe Biden, close to 2 million illegal immigrant gotaways have gotten here by escaping detection at all. It's gotten so bad that the Department of Homeland Security issued additional terror warnings last month about increased terrorism and criminal actors. The world watched the horror of Hamas in Israel a week and a half ago. Women, children, tortured, raped, beheaded, 30 Americans killed, others held captive. Terrorists would love to see the exact same thing happen to us right here. And Joe Biden's open border policy makes that our greatest threat of terrorism. Republicans have solutions that will actually work. Our Secure the Border Act of 2023 has passed the House already. It provides the manpower, the technology, and actual physical barrier to work against illegal immigration and protect our communities, protect our citizens. Under Joe Biden, he has undermined our nation's safety and security.
The United States stands firmly beside Israel. I was privileged to lead a delegation that was bipartisan into the Middle East this past week. Our final destination was Israel. Unfortunately, we found out about the attacks upon Israel by Hamas. Our journeys were stalled momentarily, but the delegation and I were able to travel into Israel and meet with many of the Israeli leaders, including the Prime Minister. So this president has failed in many different respects. First, we need to be focusing on the release of the hostages. Our hearts are just in agony. As I spoke to the families of the Israelis who had loved ones that were murdered and taken away into the Gaza Strip, I spoke with Americans in Israel who had family members that were affected by the terrorist attacks in Israel. We must focus on getting these hostages back. These loved ones are in dire straits, not knowing whether their brothers, their sisters, their parents have been tortured or killed by Hamas. And make no bones about it, the Hamas terrorists that are holding these hostages, they are backed by Iran. They are backed by Iran. And we see this administration appeasing the Iranians. Since President Joe Biden took office, he has lined the pockets of the Iranians by $80 billion. And we know that those funds go directly to terrorist organizations. Hamas, 93% of their funding comes from Iran. 100% of the funding to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad comes from Iran. We also know that they sponsor Hezbollah, the Houthis, and many other terrorist organizations around the region. We need to step up as America and push back, not just against the terrorists, but against this Iranian regime. And we have to tell our president it is absolutely unacceptable to continue with his appeasement towards the Iranians. We must stand with Israel. Quite literally, American and Israeli lives are on the line.
Well, I think you're going to hear a lot of us, I think, very united in what we're talking about in terms of Israel. I can't start talking without expressing my just deep, heartfelt sadness and horror at what we've seen happening. And, excuse me, I'll have to tell my husband to call me later. And so, I want to say it is just unbelievable to see the heartlessness, the brutality, the inhumane attack by the terrorists of Hamas on Israel. I've questioned myself a lot, thinking, how does your heart get so cold and so filled with hate that you can do such crimes against humanity, against innocent babies and children? And so that behooves us, I think, here today to echo what everybody else has said, that we must stand with Israel against the terrorists. And we got a lot on our plates. We've got Ukrainian aid that we need to be serious about and consider and move forward with. And we've got the Israeli situation and the fight against terrorism. And you might say to yourself, how can we possibly manage all of this? You know how we can do it? Because we're the United States of America, and we must do it. We're the superpower, the beacon of freedom, the one country in the world that has the allies, the friendships, and the confidence to be able to go forward with meaningful aid, meaningful support, and how much that reverberates around the globe. So I would say that in the next several weeks, we are going to be considering different packages. We're going to be looking at helping not just Israel, but also helping in Ukraine and around the world. This is a pivotal tipping point time, I think. And it's time for us to look not so much inward, but to look outward, because in the end, it's going to be our own national security. I echo those concerns of our southern border. It does make you think, do we really know what's going on? Who's coming in, what they're doing, what kind of cells are developing? And the answer to that is probably not as much as we need to. So with that, I would say I stand with Israel as I stand with all of you and many, many, many folks across this great country. Thank you.
Afghanistan, Algeria, Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, North Korea, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Uzbekistan, Yemen. Why did I just name off those countries? This is not an exhaustive list. I was at the southern border on Wednesday, October 11th. I asked Border Patrol agents who's entered this country in the last 10 days. Our Border Patrol agents have encountered at least one person from each of those countries in the first 10 days of October. In fact, when I was there at the Ursula Processing Center, just out there near McAllen, Texas, they told me they had encountered 4 Syrian men overnight. In fact, I was able to go in one of the holding rooms and physically see these 4 Syrians they'd encountered overnight by Border Patrol. This is a national security threat. There have been 1.5 million known gotaways. So we talk about the nearly 8 million that Border Patrol have encountered since Joe Biden took office. On top of that are 1.5 million known gotaways. What's a known gotaway? As I chatted with Border Patrol, that means they had physical eyes on somebody crossing the border, but were not able to encounter them or apprehend, or they saw it through video cameras. I asked, how many additional people do you think have come across that are not even known getaways? They said, we have no idea, obviously. But they said it's probably at least 50% on top of that 1.5 million. On day one, Joe Biden literally put up an open house sign on the southern border, and the world, including adversarial countries, have noticed, and they're flooding us down south. It is easier now for potential terrorists to come across our southern border, but once they're here, many are being released into our country, often to major cities, without a trace. As evil regimes like Hamas attack our ally Israel, and our adversaries are increasingly emboldened, we should be concerned about terror cells moving into the United States. And if Joe Biden and the Democrats won't secure the border now, when are they ever going to do it? It is time to secure our southern border and start enforcing the rule of law.
Leader McConnell. Leader McConnell.
Alex.
Do you have any reaction to former President Trump saying that Hezbollah is very smart, and also his criticism of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
I certainly do. I can't disagree more. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, just like Hamas, funded by the same source as Hamas. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is one of the great leaders of modern times. Andrew.
Can I ask about the supplemental, which you mentioned up top? Do you worry that including Ukraine in this Israel package could compromise the Israel portion, given the opposition to Ukraine among the House Republicans?
Well, I think we have to address the problem that I outlined at the beginning. The most recent attack in Israel is part of a broader concern developed during the Ukraine war. Basically, the democracies of the world are all on the same side. You see the South Koreans, the Japanese, the Taiwanese concerned about Ukraine. The Prime Minister of Japan said at one point, if you want to send President Xi a message, beat Putin in Ukraine. This is all interconnected. You've got the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Russians, and the Chinese, sort of, on the same side against the democratic world. So there's a connection between all of this, and I'm not surprised, frankly, that the administration seems to be inclined to send up a broad package. And as my colleagues have pointed out, the border part of it needs to be credible, not just some reference to it, but a credible dealing with the problem that Senator Daines just pointed out.
Peter McConnell. Do
Do you support Jack Liu's nomination to be the ambassador to Israel?
Well, I think he's having his hearing this week. We'll take a look at it.
Jim Jordan failed to win the speaker vote. He's 20 votes short. Do you think the House should reinstall Clayton McCarthy or empower Paxton Henry?
You guys cover the House. I got my hands full here in the Senate.
The resolution we hope to pass today, and most importantly, the U.S.'s unrelenting support for Israel. In Israel, we had a good, productive meeting. Prime Minister Netanyahu, National Unity Party, Benny Gantz, Defense Minister Gallant, Herzog, Lapid. There are no words for the horror we saw. We were in China. I met with the Israeli ambassador in Beijing. She told me about a kibbutz where they rounded up 100 people they herded them into the rec room from ages 80 to 3 months, and then machine gunned all of them down. It reminded me of what happened to my family when the Nazis came in Ukraine. Same thing. They asked my great-grandmother to put her whole greater family on the porch. She did. 35 people, aged 88 to 3 months, and they machine gunned all of them down. So many of us understand this, and it's seared in our memories. So it was an awful, awful day. So we went to Israel to share a message of resolute solidarity. America will stand with its ally Israel, and I, along with my colleagues here, will lead the effort in the Senate to provide Israel with the support required to fully defend itself from this monstrous attack. The purpose of our trip was threefold. A, to show that the U.S. stands with Israel. And I've gotten calls since we've come back. The Israelis have been so gratified that they were there at a time of great need, at a time when these vicious terrorists were trying to intimidate the world from supporting Israel with their vicious activities. Second, we met with the leaders in Israel to discuss in detail what Israel needs in terms of resources so that we can put together the best aid package. And third, we wanted to show that the U.S. is bipartisan. And we had 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and myself. The task now is threefold. 1, to eliminate the threat to Hamas, of Hamas. If Hamas is allowed to continue, the same thing will happen again. If you read the Hamas Convention and their history, they believe that there should be no Jews between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River. They would do to the rest of the Jews in Israel what they did to the Jews along the Gaza line. Second is to secure safe return of the hostages. And third is to remind Israel that she must be humanitarian, that she must obey the rule of war and must minimize civilian casualties among the Palestinians. And we did that to every leader we met. As majority leader, as the highest-ranking Jewish leader in American history, I felt I wanted to be there and I had to be there as an obligation. And now we're going to do everything in our power to ensure that the Senate delivers the support for Israel and the rescue package. We intend to get the package the end of this week, and it will include the military help Israel needs, the diplomatic and intelligence help Israel needs, as well as humanitarian aid to minimize the loss of innocent human life of Palestinians and of Israelis. Now, Senator Carter.
Well, let me thank Senator Schumer. He's expressed the view I think we all feel, the shock and horror of what Hamas did. the atrocities that they committed, crimes against humanity. It's unspeakable, and every day we see more and more images that just sickens us and recognizes how vulnerable we all are. As the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, let me tell you our priorities, my priorities. First, supporting Israel. We'll do everything we need to do to help Israel defend itself. Today, there's a resolution that was filed in the United States Senate. I want to thank the majority leader and the minority leader for authoring and leading on that resolution. It enjoys the co-sponsorship of 99 of our colleagues to show the bipartisan unified support for Israel. We need to take up a supplemental appropriation as soon as possible. Israel needs replenishment of the interceptors. They need precision missiles. They need munitions. We're making that available, but on an ongoing basis, we need to replenish the resources for that to happen. And then third, in regards to having Israel's back, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee will consider legislation to modernize and strengthen our relationship with Israel as it relates to armaments, and we'll be taking up that legislation shortly. Our second priority, these are our top priorities, is to deal with the hostages. There's not a moment that goes by that we don't think about our hostages and how we can help. We've been in conversations with leaders around the world. We've been in conversations on everything we can do to help free those hostages. We know some are Americans, and we will continue to do everything we can until they're safely home. Third, we are working very carefully with our partners to make sure that the conflict is not escalated by Hezbollah or Iran or any other actor. I think the President's taken pretty definitive steps, and we're doing everything that we can in our committee to make it clear that we stand behind the President and behind any effort to escalate this will have severe consequences. Next, the humanitarian needs. We recognize that there are innocent people that are trapped here. We want to do everything we can to provide the humanitarian needs for the innocent Palestinians that are caught by Hamas's actions. We recognize also that Israel must comply with the law of war, and we need safe passages for those who are trying to escape the violence. Fourth or fifth, we want to make sure that Hamas does not win, and one of their objectives is to eliminate the normalization efforts between Israel and its neighbors. So we are going to do everything we can, and we've already been in conversations with the Israelis and with the Saudis in regards to continuing on track the discussions that have taken place on normalization between those two countries, and you'll see some action by our committee to reinforce those efforts. There's many challenges in regards to those discussions, but we don't want Hamas to win and stop the normalization efforts. Tomorrow in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, we'll have a hearing on Secretary Liu to be the ambassador to Israel. He's highly qualified. He's the right person for the right job. But if we want to be as most effective as possible in helping Israel to deal with the hostages, to deal with the humanitarian needs, to deal with normalization, we need a confirmed ambassador in Israel as soon as possible. So I will do everything I can, not only to have the hearing, but to move him out of committee and off the floor of the United States Senate, because we do need a confirmed ambassador in Israel, and we'll work to make sure that's a reality as soon as possible.
Okay. Next, we have Senator Rosen.
Thank you. I want to thank Leader Schumer for leading our delegation, and I also want to thank my Democrat and Republican colleagues who came on this visit to show a bipartisan, united front. Americans have seen the heart-wrenching report showing the carnage and brutality of Hamas's terrorist attack. Young people gunned down while trying to flee a music festival, children brutalized and burned to death, and Holocaust survivors ripped from their families. It may sound like a nightmare, but it's real. And I'm here to tell the world and to tell all of you, it's all too real, all too devastating. We cannot and we must not look away. As the only Jewish mother serving in the United States Senate, meeting with Israeli parents whose children have been held captive by Hamas, hearing those stories, seeing the fear and the pain in their eyes, their lives forever changed by this act of terror. That's something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And I brought these stories back with me, along with one message. This is the time to take decisive action to help Israel. Here in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, both sides of the aisle, must work together and work together quickly to deliver support as soon as possible. And that means providing the funding and defensive capabilities to do the following: protect the Israeli people, rescue those who are being held hostage, and hold Hamas accountable for the atrocities that they have committed. I fully believe that we can and will get this done because America's support is unwavering and unconditional. I said this in Israel, and I will repeat it now. History has shown what happens when the world abandons the Jewish people. And as long as I'm here, America will stand with Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. And last but not least, Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. Thank you, folks, for being here today. As Senator Schumer mentioned, 5 of us went over there. The 3 of us here, Senator Rosen, myself, Senator Schumer, but Senator Cassidy and Romney as well. We spent all day on Sunday, about 13 hours, meeting with the leadership of the Israeli government, the opposition, the war cabinet, the defense minister, President Herzog, as well, the ambassador, our diplomats in Israel. And I got to say, folks, this was kind of unlike any day I've had in my entire career, and I spent 25 years in the Navy. It was heart-wrenching to hear over and over again from the leadership of the Israeli government just the brutality and the heinous acts that Hamas committed against the Jewish people in Israel was it was almost indescribable. And then later to meet with the family members of the American hostages and to hear their stories, tragic stories about their loved ones, and just wanted some reassurance from us that we will do everything in our power to get their family members back, and we will. To a person, all 5 of us stressed to the Israeli leadership the need to have a humanitarian response to this situation. We've already started providing security assistance. Hamas is a terrorist organization and has to be defeated. There is no doubt about that, and we stand with Israel in their goal to eliminate this brutal organization. We've already sent 100,000 metric tons of American diplomacy in the way of the USS Gerald Ford. Another aircraft carrier is going to arrive, the USS Eisenhower shortly, and a Marine Rapid Response interceptor rounds for the Iron Dome system. We personally experienced the benefit of Iron Dome while we were there in Tel Aviv with a couple rocket attacks against Tel Aviv. So we're going to work closely with our other colleagues across the aisle to make sure we continue to stand with our ally, Israel, so they can defend themselves against Hamas. I think it's important to remind everybody that Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are not Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization that needs to be eliminated. And we stand with Israel, who wants peace. Finally, let me just say one more thing. There are 12 members of CENTCOM of the United States military that have not been confirmed by the United States Senate because of one senator Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. We need to get these positions confirmed. If CENTCOM is not at its full strength, it hurts Israel and it helps Hamas. Thank you.
Thank you, my three colleagues.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. Just now there are reports that Israeli airstrike killed about 500 civilians on the Palestinian hospital in Gaza. Can I get your reaction to that? And two, House Republicans are drafting legislation in the UMF in case this escalates into a broader regional conflict with Iran. Can I get your thoughts on that and how concerned?
Yeah, I haven't seen the first reports. As I've said, Israel has an obligation to minimize the loss of innocent civilian life and get them the materials they need, the humanitarian materials. Now, of course, you've got to make sure Hamas doesn't get hold of that. On the AUMF, I haven't seen that one either, so I'm not going to comment. It's like a chorus here.
Should Senator Menendez be allowed to attend the classified briefing on Israel tomorrow? And do you still stand by your position that he should not resign? You're not calling him for
He's not going to attend the briefing tomorrow.
Did
Yes.
you ask him to do that? Did you ask him?
I don't get involved in I've had private conversations. I don't get involved in what happened in them on this kind of thing. He's not attending.
How about the Foreign Relations
Next,
Committee?
go ahead.
Should he stay on the Foreign Relations Committee?
For passing appropriations bills, and will the supplemental package for Israel come before that? What do you expect?
We'd like to get the supplemental package moved as quickly as possible because the needs are great in both Israel and Ukraine. And we'll have to see how the administration's supposed to send us one the end of this week. I'm working with Leader McConnell to get it done ASAP. Okay? Yes. Yes. I think a ceasefire, if you allow Hamas to continue to exist as is, the same thing will happen again, and we have to do everything to prevent that from happening.
Senator
Yes.
Schumer.
Go ahead.
Are you having any conversations with any of the potential counterparts on the Republican side in the House about anything in this supplemental, or are you just sort of moving ahead, plowing ahead in the
Well,
Senate?
the House is sort of a mess, and therefore we think the best thing to do is pass a strong, big supplemental with strong bipartisan support, and that may force the House to act.